Hey everyone, Dr. Justin Feldman here from Feldman Physical Therapy and Performance, and we're going to talk today about squat mechanics. So squat mechanics, if you look on the internet, Google, YouTube, wherever you like to look for information that is slightly reliable, you're going to find endless amounts of articles, videos, different people, experts talking about the exact perfect way that you should squat. And spoiler alert, we're all a little bit different, and none of us are shaped exactly the same. We're right-handed, left-handed, different things. And so there's not really a perfect way to squat for everybody. But what we want to do today is kind of go through a couple things you can do to help figure out the best position for you to squat. So before we get into all of that, what I want you to do is go down below, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and throw some comments down below if you have questions or pieces of information you don't agree with or you do agree with, more you want to learn about. Helps the channel grow and helps other people find out about us. All right, so first thing we're talking about mechanics-wise is going to be foot width, so how far apart your feet should be. And you could look at this a whole bunch of different ways. Sometimes it depends on the type of squat you're doing. Sometimes it depends on your goal with squatting. But a general rule we like to give people who aren't quite sure where to start from is to take your big toe, that first joint in your big toe, and get it slightly outside of your shoulder. So for most people, generally, your shoulders and your hips are about the same width. And so if you imagine a line that comes right down the outside of your shoulder and drops straight down, we want it to fall just inside your big toe as you're standing there. And so that's the first way to figure out what the right width of your feet are. And as you try this, you might find you like your stance just a little narrower or a little bit wider. Totally fine. This is a great guideline, sort of a place to get you started. All right, so we've got your foot stance all set up, right? We know how wide you want your feet. Now the question is, what do you do with your feet? Do you make them really, really toed out? Do they have to stay perfectly straight? And so the way we have people do this is I like to have you kind of step into it. And so you take a step forward, get sort of nice natural stance. You're going to come up on your heels, balance, and then just let your feet fall forward. And where you fall and sort of where they land is what is generally the best place for you to start. You might notice when I do it that my feet aren't exactly the same. My left foot likes to be slightly more toed out than my right. And that's pretty true when I squat. I notice that that's kind of the position that seems to work best for my hips. So don't expect that your feet have to be symmetrical. There can be a little bit of a difference. And play around with how you feel in each position, a little wider, a little narrower. But generally that idea of up on your heel and let your foot fall is a good way to start out. All right, so next thing we're going to talk about, we've got your foot width, we've got your toe out, which is going to control some of your hip position. And the next real big hot button issue when we talk about squatting is how deep should you go? And there's a couple different schools of thought here. And a lot of it, sort of like everything else, is basically it depends. Mostly it depends on your goal and what you're trying to do. My thing is I like to have people try to squat as big a range of motion, so as deep as they can do it, and still maintain a really good solid form and control of the movement. So we like to start people with a goblet squat, get not too heavy of a weight, right? And we want you sort of hold that weight right up against your chest, okay? Ideally, we don't want the weight to be coming away from your body as you're going down. We don't want you to use the weight as a counterbalance. We want you to use the weight as a little bit of resistance. And you're here, and then as you start to squat down, right? We want you to be able to keep it there, and I want you to be able to control it all the way through. I'm going to go ahead and go sideways here. And as you go down, right, what we're looking for is I don't want you to have to dump super far forward, all right? I also don't want you going backwards so far that you lose your range of motion. we almost want it sort of a straight drop down, okay, and back up. And you can go as far down as you can do it and maintain a really good solid control of that movement. If you feel like you're really rocking forward or back, having to lean left and right, stop before you hit that depth. And then as you get stronger with the movement, your range will grow and you'll be able to go further and further down. All right, now let's talk about a couple things that you don't need to worry about. So a couple myths or random things you hear about people squatting. The first one is always that your knees aren't allowed to go over your toes, right? Totally fine. Your knees are allowed to go over your toes. Again, just depends on the goal of what you're trying to do. Sometimes if we think that people are moving in a way or their knees are hurting, we'll try and switch their squat form to one that doesn't let their knees go over their toes. But sometimes if people are, let's just say, a runner who finds themselves in a position where their knees going over a lot, that's a spot we want you to be stronger. We want you to be more resilient. So we're going to encourage you to get your knees over your toes a little bit. Totally fine, okay? Other thing is we start to talk about what the best thing to do with your upper body is, right? And one thing we want you to do is, yeah, we want you to stay tall, okay? But sometimes what happens is when people talk about staying tall or keeping their chest out, right? When they're squatting, that's a big coaching term you'll hear a lot. And what people will do is they'll sort of arch this way, and now they've got this big arch in their back. And so you could stay tall, but we don't want you to really flare your rib cage out, okay? That starts to take away from your ability to stabilize and brace while you're squatting. And it just puts a lot of unnecessary load on your back. So yeah, depending on the type of squat, let's just say you're doing a back squat, you might end up here. That's okay. You don't necessarily need to fight to be in this huge arched position. I'd rather you tuck your rib cage, stay controlled, and move through the movement that way. Again, being able to be in that controlled position might somewhat limit the depth and how deep you can go. That's okay. Hopefully this was useful. You got a bunch of information. I'm sure if we leave this up on YouTube for long enough, some of it will be proven false and inaccurate. So that'll be fun. Check back in, I want to say a year, but it could be as quick as 6 months for an updated video on the new things that we've learned as people continue to do a bunch of research and study the squat. But hopefully you found this useful. Definitely go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Leave us some comments. Let us know what other things you want to be learning about, and we'll keep the content flowing.